demand for pupil places throughout the country in the coming years and how they are to be addressed. Primary enrolments, which have already risen substantially in recent years, are projected to rise by over another 37,000 pupils by 2015, and they are set to continue to rise, with a likely peak at around 596,000 pupils to be catered for in 2019. This compares with some 526,000 pupils enrolled in primary schools for the current academic year, or for last year, I should say. The Deputy rightly points out that the Dublin South East area is among those where some of this increases in creating pressure for extra school places, and this has been felt very strongly in the short term. The Department has already highlighted the Dublin South East area as one that will need extra school places from 2014 onwards. The Deputy will be aware that the Department uses a GIS system to identify where the pressure for school places will arise. The GIS uses data from the Central Statistics Office, the Ordnance Survey of Ireland, and also the Department of Social Protection, in addition to the Department's own databases. It also uses data from the local authorities. With this information, the Department carried out a study of the country to identify where there will be a requirement for a significant additional school provision at both primary and post-primary. Over the coming years, and also in the Dublin South East area, these areas surfaced as needing extra school places under this particular process. In June of 2011, I announced the need for the establishment of 20 new primary schools, talking approximately about 500 pupils per school, 20 new primary schools to cater for increased demographics across a number of locations up to and including 2017. This includes the establishment of a new school for Dublin South East area. The school, known as the Shelleybanks Educate Together School, which is opening this coming September, will be located initially in start-up accommodation in Ballsbridge, and it will cater for demand for pupil places from the Sandymount Ringsend Irishtown area. It is planned that the new school will provide an additional 16 mainstream classrooms for the area when it is fully developed, or more if extra capacity is needed. The Department is currently working on acquiring permanent accommodation for the school, but this alone, this alone is not enough. And additional capacity is being provided in other schools in the area too. The building project to facilitate the amalgamation and expansion of 2 schools is facilitated in the 5-year construction programme that I announced in March of 2012. The project is currently at an advanced stage of architectural planning, and this project will provide further classrooms for the Dublin South East area when completed. The Department is also working closely with some of the other schools in the area to address enrolment issues in the shorter term, starting next September. These schools include Canon O'Hanlon Memorial School, otherwise known as Star of the Sea in Sandymount, St Bridget Convent School in Haddington Road, and Lakelands in Guildford Road. I wish to record my thanks to the schools for their help and support in this matter. In tandem, the Department is examining the most up-to-date demographic data available for the area to determine further needs and to ensure that these are met in a timely manner. I will continue with the Department to monitor the situation to ensure that every pupil seeking a place in the area can have access to one.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy, 2 minutes supplementary.
I welcome your reply, Minister, and of course you also represent this constituency, so you're fully aware of all of the issues involved. And I very much welcome the reforms that you're bringing into the school admissions process, and they're being received very well in general in the constituency and in the country, and also the advanced school building programme. But you'll be getting the same correspondence as I have from parents who are thinking about deferring sending their children to school in September of 2014, some who have moved to baptise their children in a matter of weeks just to try and get them up the lists, and others who have had to go to other family members to try and help with moving to pay for private education because they can't get into a local state school. And you rightly identified some of the schools where there are a lot of problems, also St Belmont's, of course, or St Mary's on Belmont Avenue. But in the case for September 2014, is it a possibility that we could, for example, have an extra classroom in the new Educate Together school for Shelleybanks? Is it a possibility that there might be a site that's currently a temporary site, for example, somewhere like Harcourt Terrace, that could be expanded on a temporary basis? Could property be leased? And as well as that, in terms of the possible solutions, to what extent are the schools and through the school boards, the parents being informed of all the efforts you're taking to try and resolve the situation? Because as each week moves on, parents become more frantic about it. Thank you, Chair.
Deputy Minister, 2 minutes.
I welcome the Deputy's comments and his recognition of what we're trying to do. Part of the problem is that the GIS system, which register the physical location of every child benefit payment from 1-year-old, 2-year-old and 3-year-old works very accurately and very satisfactorily in areas where, for example, outside a town like Clonakilty, for example, you'd have a fair idea, or Donegal town, what the growing population was in advance and the likelihood of presenting in the nearest urban area. In a large urban area like Dublin, you have people who've moved to the suburbs who grew up perhaps in the inner city area and whose children are now wanting to go to school. They're bringing them back into the city centre as they're entitled to do, and the grandparents are perhaps providing support services after school. So our ability to measure and capture the numbers of people looking for places in big urban areas, whether it's in Cork, Limerick, Galway or Dublin, is less clear and less sophisticated, self-evidently, than it is in different parts of the country where the growth in demand can only be accommodated in the area most likely to accommodate it. They're not going to travel miles and miles in another direction. Notwithstanding that, the increase in the numbers has caught us to a certain extent by surprise, and we are looking at emergency measures to get extra accommodation. You've referred to some of them. We've had one setback in relation to one school, the amalgamation school on Haddington Road, St. Bridget's and St. Mary's, where planning permission, everything was got in the normal way, and then there was an appeal lodged literally in the last working day, of which perfectly valid, perfectly entitled to so do. Difficulties around issues of traffic, and we're hoping that the appeal process can be expedited as quickly as possible. But I thank the Deputy for bringing this matter to the attention of the House, because it is an issue, and I will communicate with him and other colleagues in the constituency.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Deputy. Our next topical issue is in the name of Deputy Michael Kitt to the Minister for Environment, Community and Local Government. The need for additional social and voluntary housing with specific reference to the Ballinasloe St Vincent de Paul building project for the elderly.
Chairman, for taking this topic. Obviously, we'll have a chance, I hope, tomorrow to talk about other issues in relation to housing. But I think one thing that has come across very clear to all members of this House is the fact that housing construction has fallen to low levels and very critically low levels. And the output, Chairman, is not keeping pace with the additional households that are formed every year. We're told that there are 100,000 people on the housing waiting lists, but the figures I've received, and the Minister might confirm this, in relation to housing units provided last year was something in the region of 8,000. And I think it's very important that social housing in particular should be increased because of the increase in homelessness in the past 2 years. I also would hope that the government could assist assist housing associations by resolving some of the existing hurdles that could deliver more social housing. And I'm talking particularly in relation to availing of private finance with the appropriate terms and conditions, and indeed removing the administrative hurdles that are there, such as state mortgage charges. The NAMA model has been talked about a lot. I think the NAMA model needs to be speeded up in relation to property transfers, and indeed I would hope that we could have at least a 3-year planned housing development programme. So I think there are a lot of areas there that could be looked at, but I would hope in particular, Minister, that you could look at the voluntary housing projects, because I have a case which I've raised before by way of a Dail question in relation to the St Vincent de Paul Society project at Osmond House, Ballinasloe, County Galway, a proposed voluntary housing project for the elderly in Ballinasloe. And indeed, this project is one of many that requires the Department's capital assistance scheme funding to proceed to the next stage. Now, I understand that by the 27th of March, which is only 14 days away, local authorities have to submit their prioritised list of capital assistance projects, and I hope that Ballinasloe would be considered in this particular allocation. To make the point that Ballinasloe does not have any housing for the elderly, and this compares to a town like Tuam, where Clewidge have a very successful sheltered housing project, mostly for elderly people. And I think that, given the amount of work that's gone into the project by the St. Vincent de Paul group, I would hope that this could be favourably considered. I think that, a lot of elderly people are feeling now a combination of social welfare cutbacks and the increase in rents. I think that is particularly so in Dublin, where we see, because of those issues, more and more people are on social housing waiting lists. And of course, homelessness will continue if we don't tackle the issue. And I know the Minister has talked about 2016 being the year when we hopefully will deal with homelessness for once and for all. But I think we have to do a lot more work now if we're going to meet the target in 2016.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Deputy Kitt for raising this matter, and I know of your particular interest in the whole housing area, Deputy Kitt. As Minister for Housing, I'm keenly aware of the challenges we face in providing housing supports to a range of vulnerable people in County Galway and elsewhere. The Government's 2011 Housing Policy Statement clearly outlines that the priority for Government is to meet the most acute needs of households applying for social housing support. Government is responding to these needs through a variety of mechanisms and more flexible funding models. To maximise the social housing gain from constrained resources, the Social Housing Leasing Initiative and the Rental Accommodation Scheme each played their part, and I'm fully committed to capturing social housing gain from private developments. Alongside expanding the role of the approved housing bodies in terms of acquisitions and construction, other mechanisms will include options to purchase within the leasing model and build to lease. And as Deputy Kitt has said, there were a relatively small number of houses built last year. I think you used the figure of 8,000, which wouldn't be far off the mark in terms of total housing construction. Increasing both public and private housing supply is a priority for the Government. Earlier today, I was pleased to announce the restart of a local authority mainstream house building programme. Over the next 2 years, €68 million will be invested across the country to build new social homes for families in need of housing. This investment represents the first return to new mainstream local authority house building in a number of years. This initiative, which will see some 442 new homes built across the country for families on the waiting list, is just one of a number of government-backed initiatives that we're launching in 2014 that will provide high-quality homes for families. I also intend to announce details of a special investment of €15 million for the retrofitting of boarded-up local authority houses to make these available to households in need of social housing. Not only will these programmes deliver new or better housing for people, they will also create and sustain hundreds of jobs in the construction and green energy sectors. I know Deputy Kitt is very familiar with the Capital Assistance Scheme, whereby funding of up to 100% of the cost of projects is provided to the approved housing bodies through the local authorities for the provision of accommodation for persons with specific categories of housing need, including older persons, persons with a disability or homeless persons. Over the years, the CAS scheme has funded the provision of over 27,000 units of accommodation, and I am committed to the retention of this very worthwhile programme. In January, as Deputy Kitt has said, my department requested local authorities to issue a call for proposals under CAS, requesting approved housing bodies to put forward cost-effective and sustainable proposals to meet the accommodation needs of people with specific categories of housing need within their administrative areas. Local authorities are required, as you said, Deputy Kitt, to submit a prioritised list of proposals to my department by the 28th of March for new construction and acquisition projects to be funded and progressed over the next 2 years. It will be a matter for local authorities to determine the relative priority of projects on the basis of their contribution to meeting local housing need and to shortlist these in order of merit. Further consideration of the CAS projects for funding approval over the next 2 years, including projects submitted in County Galway, must await the receipt of submissions from the local authorities. So I look forward to receiving the submissions by the 28th of March, and then we'll make decisions very quickly. Deputy Kitt.
Thank you. Deputy, 2 minutes supplementary.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Minister. Well, obviously, I welcome, Minister, any announcements that you are making in relation to the next 2 years. where 68 million will be invested across the country to build new social homes for family in needs of housing. I just make the point, Minister, that you're talking about 442 new homes built across the country for families on waiting lists. Well, if the figure is true that it's 100,000 people on the waiting list, that is a very small amount of families that are going to help. Every new home is a help, and I would hope that perhaps with the support of the Department of Finance, you'll get further funding to try and deal with a very, very long waiting list. And I've suggested already in my few minutes, Minister, that you might look to what voluntary housing organisations are doing and try and assist them, because I think they have great determination to provide a real housing need in a county like Galway. I'm sure it's the same in other counties, but there's a lot of obstacles being placed in their way, and I've dealt with some of those, and hopefully you might be able to help out if there was more assistance given to them. And if, for example, those people who get houses through the voluntary association could actually purchase the houses under a tenant purchase scheme, which they could do if they were built through the local authority. I think the other issue which you didn't deal with is the question of NAMA. Again, I would like to see that the pace of NAMA property transfers could be speeded up to ensure that whatever is available there could be provided. Maybe state land also could be looked at, indeed, as I've suggested in the past. And indeed, I think it's true to say that NAMA have said that they are willing to cooperate more in dealing with a speeding up of the transfer of property. So I would like to deal with those issues, and hopefully tomorrow we'll have another discussion on housing. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Deputy Kate, and we will have an opportunity tomorrow to address some of these issues. But just to respond to some of the things that you have said, I do hope we will be able to get further funding, and I welcome support from all sides of the House in terms of getting as much funding as we can for the construction of housing, because clearly there is a need out there. With regard to the NAMA units, they have speeded up now quite a bit, and we do expect that we will get the full 2,000 units during the lifetime of the government. That is the commitment that we have made, and we meet NAMA fairly regularly to address the issues, and I think we have a more simplified system now in terms of the transfer of NAMA units. With regard to the voluntary sector and getting private funding, which you raised in your initial contribution and also in your second contribution, there is also the CAF scheme, whereby only approximately 25% of the funding comes from the state, and the voluntary sector raises extra funding itself, and that is progressing. We now have voluntary regulation of the private sector, and they tell us that that makes it easier for them to get funding in the private sector. And we have some examples now where that is progressing. So basically, I'm willing to look at all of the various options that come forward. We expect to deliver about 5,000 units this year. Some of them from that direct construction, some of it from the CAF and the CAS funding, some of it through NAMA, and some of it through leasing and RAS. So we're using as many different systems as we can, because clearly there is a need. But I would certainly, along with yourself, Deputy Kate, and I think probably along with everybody in this chamber, I would like to increase the construction of local authority housing. And I'm very happy that today is the start of a mainstream programme again after the collapse of the economy in Ireland. And I would hope that we will be able to make further announcements in the near future.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Deputy. Our next topical issue is in the name of Deputy Jonathan O'Brien, and it's to the Minister for Health. The reported inadequate levels of midwife staffing at Cork University Hospital. Deputy, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I won't take the full 4 minutes. I'm sure, Minister Lynch, you may have seen the article on the front page of the Evening Echo yesterday, and obviously it was a very worrying article for any expecting mothers in the southern region, and far from wanting to stand up here and to say we have a crisis or we have a safety issue within our maternity hospitals or to start scaremongering, that is not what I'm proposing to do. The reason I put down the topical issue was to allow the government to outline what their plans are in the wake of the recent report and to give some reassurance to expectant mothers. So, as I said, I'm not here to scaremonger, I'm here to give the government the opportunity to outline exactly what steps they're going to be taking. But Minister, as you have probably read the report yesterday, and you will know all the facts, the INMO estimate that it will take about 550 posts to be filled to bring the 19 maternity hospitals up to the international best standard for the birth rate plus of one midwife to every 29.5 births. And I think the national average in the 19 hospitals at the moment stands in 1 in 38, where in the CUMH it's at 1 in 37. And they range from 1 in 30 right up to 1 in 55, Minister. And obviously this is very worrying. It's also very worrying that none of the 19 maternity hospitals are actually operating in what is known as the international best practice in terms of 1 in 29.5. It's also worrying when you consider that Liam Doran recently said that even if all of the posts were to be filled in the morning and a campaign of advertisement to fill those posts was undertaken by the government, in his estimation it would take 5 to 6 years to fill all of those posts with experienced registered midwives. Now, I know that the HSE have given a commitment to undertake a national examination following the recent report which was published into the 19 maternity hospitals, and I'm just wondering if the Minister could outline what steps the government will be taking to reassure expectant mothers.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Just to thank the Deputy for putting down the question and to appreciate very much the approach being taken. I suppose as parents ourselves, we're always very conscious of the fact that delivering a baby is always the most vulnerable time for any woman and the most anxious time for any family. And I think we have to first, because of recent incidents, not in CUMH in Cork, but in Portlaoise, I think we should extend our sympathies equally to people who have lost, I'm sure, what were very much longed for babies, and I think we all feel that loss. I would like to thank the Deputy for raising this issue, and at the outset I would like to make it clear that there is no embargo on the recruitment of midwives or other frontline staff in the public health service. While the numbers employed across the public health service must be reduced in order to meet fiscal and budgetary targets, it is recognised that certain services, such as maternity, are demand-led and require specialist staffing. Arrangements are in place in the HSE to allow the recruitment of such staff where it has been established that there is an urgent service requirement. I am satisfied that it is open to the HSE to recruit the levels of frontline staff necessary to ensure that we have a safe service provision. More generally, in order to mitigate the impact on frontline services of the reduction in employment numbers, the priority is to reform how health services are delivered in order to ensure a more productive and cost-efficient health system. At the end of 2013, the number of staff midwives, including senior staff grade in the public health service, was 1,341 whole-time equivalents, including 20 on the graduate placement scheme. The number at the end of 2017 was 933 whole-time equivalents. This shows the manner in which the HSE has the capacity to focus recruitment in specific areas where increases are required. In addition, the increase in nursing hours available under the Haddington Road Agreement equates to nearly 1,400 additional nurses. The Deputy might also be interested to note that the number of nursing staff increased by 100 in the first month of 2014, reflecting the take-up of posts under the Graduate Initiative. With regard to staffing levels at Cork University Maternity Hospital, I have been informed by the HSE that from a staff complement of 397 whole-time equivalents, currently 388 midwifery nurses are employed. I understand that there are active recruitment processes to fill the nursing midwifery, including 7.5 gynaecological nursing posts and 2 assistant directors of midwifery. I should also draw the attention of the House to a midwifery workload and workforce review in maternity service in Ireland, which will be undertaken by the HSE. This review will validate staffing levels for midwives and maternity care assistants in maternity units nationally, and will recommend appropriate midwifery staffing and skill mix levels. Initiatives to meet emerging models of maternity care, ensuring that standards of safety and quality care for women and their families are met. The workforce review will inform the new National Maternity Services Strategy. As part of the development of the strategy, maternity services in all parts of the country will be subject to review and evaluation. The development of this strategy is currently underway and will determine the optimum configuration of maternity services to ensure that women in Ireland have access to safe, high-quality maternity care in a setting most appropriate to their needs. And it is my intention to publish this strategy later this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy,
Thank
2
you,
minutes
Minister.
supplementary.
Thank you for your answer. And Minister, I take you on your word that there is no embargo on frontline staff, particularly in maternity hospitals. And if that is the case, then maybe you may be able to enlighten us what is the logjam in terms of why none of the 19 maternity hospitals have what's known as the best practice in terms of the birth rate plus of 1 midwife for every 29.5 babies. I mean, in CUMH, I think they're delivering 25 babies a day. And according to the report yesterday in the local paper, it would take an additional 60 staff to bring that up to the international recognised best practice, Minister. And just on the terms of recruitment, are you saying that there is a recruitment campaign currently underway within the hospitals or within the HSE to recruit an adequate number of midwives to bring the hospitals up to that particular rate? And on the report itself that you're undertaking, Minister, it won't be just looking at the staffing levels. I presume it's going to look at the area of maternity hospitals in a very holistic way in terms of safety, best practice, and I presume that's what the report, the examination at the HSE is going to undertake will encompass. And if that is the case, and it will be published before the end of the year, can we have a commitment, Minister, that if whatever recommendations come out of that, given obviously fiscal constraints, will be implemented as quickly as possible? Because, as you said, having a baby is probably one of the most vulnerable times for women and one of the most anxious times, and whatever reassurance and whether it's around resources or whether it's around information that can be given to women who go through a pregnancy and end up in maternity hospital, we have to ensure that they have that reassurance, that there are adequate resources and that all safety standards are being met at all times.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
Just to outline, it is intended to produce a strategy in relation to our maternity services, and it will not just be about one hospital, it will be about all of the maternity units that operate within the state. There is no embargo on the recruitment of staff that are considered to be absolutely necessary to provide a safe service, and that includes midwifery, nursing, and in fact the holistic approach that we're now taking to a maternity service. I would just like to reassure people that apart from the events that we're all very conscious of in the recent past, our maternity services are extraordinarily safe. They're extraordinarily safe. And not alone are they safe, but they give a degree of confidence to every mother who attends at those services. And the events that happened in the recent past are things we must learn from and ensure they will never again happen. And the strategy, when it is produced, because we do now have a Director of Nursing, we didn't have one up to this point, we now do within the Department of Health, we have a Director of Nursing, and it is that person who will be undertaking this survey in order to produce a strategy. Also, the grouping of hospitals will ensure a safer delivery of care across a range of issues. And as you will know, Deputy, that grouping is very much central to what happens within not just CUMH, but within the Greater Cork area. And I am convinced that the awful events that happened in the recent past, which left people, mothers and families, bereft and having to deal with that awful circumstances, that we should learn from that. We should learn from it, and we should ensure that that won't happen again. And I think that learning has already been undertaken.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Deputy. We now move on to our final topical issue in the names of Deputies Michelle Mulhern, Barry Cowan and Joan Collins. To the Minister for Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, the sale of Elverys Sports and the need to protect the 700 jobs in the company. There are 6 minutes to share between the 3 deputies, 2 minutes each. Thanks.
Thank you, Cahill. Minister, Elverys Sports is a company which has been trading profitably, notwithstanding it's been taken into NAMA. This is through the hard work of management and staff over the years. It has gone from a single shop in Castlebar, County Mayo, and has been built up to 56 stores nationwide with a growing online business. Now, with the shenanigans of NAMA in the way it has handled the sale of this business, we have a profitable company actually gone into examinership. Is this the way NAMA, the biggest property company in the world, is doing its business on behalf of the taxpayer of this country? NAMA issued a notice of decision to sell the company to a management buyout team. At way past the 11th hour, NAMA allowed the deal to be scuppered by entertaining a further bid, which then resulted in the company being placed in examinership. What is the financial cost of this examinership, not to mention associated expenses? The truth is, Elverys' business has now been put into freefall on account of the uncertainty which adversely affects the ability of the company to trade, and which must surely undermine the value of the company when it comes to the actual sale. It is enough to make my blood boil when you consider the jobs at stake. But job protection seems not to be a particular feature for NAMA in this sale of Elverys. I am disappointed the Minister for Finance is not here to answer these questions on account of his responsibility for NAMA and its activities. Having said that, we are here today to press the case so that the 700 jobs at risk nationwide would be saved. I believe the best way forward is for a management buyout to proceed. These people know how this company works best and have the wherewithal to forge ahead to ensure Elverys' growth as a leading Irish company and for jobs to be retained. Every other day, Minister, I hear you and other ministers, the IDA and other government agencies state how difficult it is to get jobs into the West. We see that job creation has mainly taken place in the main centres of population. The revised action plan for jobs has now a regional focus in recognition of this reality. I'm just winding up. Minister, what is the action plan to retain the nearly 200 jobs in Mayo in existence already, which are in jeopardy? How has real meaning been given to the very high priority NAMA is supposed to place on preservation of jobs in the sale of Elverys Sports? Please give reassurance to the workers watching here today and throughout the country.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Cowan.
Thank you very much, Cahill. Chairman, this is obviously a very serious issue, particularly serious for the 700 employees and for their families and for the communities where they reside. Their staff are local to their respective units throughout the country. They're dedicated and embedded in their communities, as witnessed by virtue of the sponsorship that they offer various clubs and organisations and the support and help they give to students in getting summer work and weekend work. The company, as has been said by the previous speakers, in examinership after a management buyout was deemed not to be successful because of the fact that others wished to enter the fray. I think the examiner obviously has an obligation to act in the interest of NAMA, as has been explained. NAMA too has an obligation to act in the interest of the taxpayer, and we too have our own obligations to those that give us the privilege to be here, and we too have an obligation to the taxpayer that the funds that are provided to the likes of NAMA yield and dividend a return. And it is my belief that any bid of the 6 that are supposedly on the table must have at its core a commitment to staff interests. And the best way to ensure that is for the examiner to allow a staff representative to be privy to the assessment of the various bids. It is the responsibility of government to ensure that NAMA is cognizant of its social obligations as well as its economic responsibilities. And it is the responsibility of government to ensure that debt not associated necessarily with a profitable business such as this is not allowed to drown jobs, to drown communities, and to drown the retail sector and rid our towns of much needed investment. This is indeed, I believe, a test of the recent comments by Morgan Kelly and his analysis. And it's time for this government to show that it won't stand idly by in a situation such as this. And it won't allow this or any other SME of its type to be put to the sword by those who seek to strangle it in the way in which has been pursued.
Thank you, Deputy Joan Collins. 2 minutes.
Minister, I received an email, and I presume many other TDs here last week, and I had seen reports over the last period of time of Elverys going into examinership, and that most likely there would be a management buyout. And that seemingly is the general feeling of the workers there, who feel they'd be better catered for or looked after from the point of view of their contracts, their wage, under the management buyout. And it just seems absolutely amazing that we've come to this situation where NAM the examiner has let other buyers in now into the fray of the buyout. And I just wanted to hear from yourself today what the situation is, why this has happened, what can happen now in the future, and anything that does happen is that those 700 jobs are protected. And their contracts and their conditions. And I think that's really the most important thing that comes from this. This is a hugely traditional company in Ireland. It provides, as has been said, sponsorship for many of our sports, and it's a much better sponsorship than we get from the cigarette companies or the drink companies. And I think we should be supporting this sort of local business in our community as much as possible. And can the Minister intervene into NAMA? Can the Minister intervene into an examinership? I don't know whether he can or not, I'm not sure. But there's an opportunity here for you to come in today and explain that to the workers.
Deputy Minister. Response, thanks.
First of all, I'd like to thank Deputy Mulhern, Deputy Barry Cowan and Deputy Joan Collins for raising this issue. Clearly, as a Minister with responsibility for employment, I'm always concerned about any potential job losses, and that's been my sole focus since taking office. To start, I'd like to say that the company concerned is in the middle of the examinership process. It's important that nothing be said here today that might affect the outcome of that process. It will be for the examiner to consult with creditors, potential investors and other relevant parties to devise the most appropriate course of action in the interests of the survival of the company, and to put that course of action to the court for approval. The court will have the final say. Until then, the company is in the protection of the court, and we must be careful to respect that. As deputies will know, the examinership is the main debt restructuring system for companies in Ireland and has been in existence since 1990. Examinership allows for the rescue of companies that find themselves insolvent but have the potential to return to financial viability and continue in operation into the future. The key feature of the process is a period of court protection lasting up to 100 days, during which no one may institute proceedings against the company or petition for the company to be wound up. The examiner uses this time to devise a scheme of arrangement in consultation with creditors, the company management, potential investors and any other parties that would be affected by the scheme. The scheme of arrangement is then put to the court, and if a majority of the company's creditors agree and the court approves, it becomes binding on all of them. In Elverys' case, I'm informed that NAMA, in its role as a secured lender, approved the sale of assets of Staunton Sports, which is the parent company of Elverys, to the management team following a process run by the directors of Staunton Sports through IBI Corporate Finance, acting under the duty of care to NAMA. However, the receivership event required to give effect to the transaction could not proceed at the agreed time because the management team did not have the requisite funding in place to complete. A higher bid was indicated by another party prior to the receiver's appointment and sale completion. In the light of this, the prospective receiver advised he would be legally obliged to consider this bid if appointed as receiver, since he has a statutory obligation to obtain the best price reasonably obtainable for the secured assets at the time of their sale. Several press outlets carried news of the third-party bid. Uncertainty created by this caused concern among suppliers and trade creditors, which the directors of Staunton Sports brought to NAMA's attention. Having regard to the deteriorating condition of the business and the company's insolvent position, based on legal advice, NAMA put to the directors of Staunton Sports that examinership was an alternative option which would permit all bids to be considered while the company was under the protection of the High Court. It is on the public record that the appointment of an examiner to Elverys Sports was supported by the directors of the company. The decision to seek the protection of the court through examinership was taken in order to protect the company and its employees. NAMA is funding the company during the examinership process. It is understood that the examiner is currently in the process of engaging with various parties who have expressed an interest in the business, including the management team, and as part of the process has requested proposals from each of the parties as to their plans for the business and the employees of the company. The examiner has not yet concluded this process. I believe that the examiner is a good option for companies that have real prospects for the future, but find themselves in financial difficulty at this point of time. I should say that at this point, the examiner has already gone to the court and presented the case that the company had a prospect of viability. So the court has given the 100 days because he has convinced the court of the prospect of viability, and that's an important first, if you like, rung that has to be crossed, and the company has done that. It is a balanced procedure, taking into account both the interests of the ailing company and the rights of the creditors, and giving the courts a role in ensuring fair and appropriate outcome. Of course, there have been some criticisms of the costs associated with the process. For that reason, the Oireachtas enacted the company's miscellaneous provision 2013, late last year, to allow small private companies to apply for examinership directly in the Circuit Court, rather than having to go first to the High Court. I hope that this will make examinership an option for more companies in the future. In the meantime, I am keeping the law on examinership under review to identify if there are other ways in which we can make it less costly. Just on the issue specifically that Joan Collins raised of the terms and conditions, that will be governed by the TUPE, the TUPE Act, and in the event of the company being sold as a going concern, the TUPE obligations apply, so that the terms of conditions continue to the new owner. I think I've answered the other issues that were raised by deputies.
For the deputies to respond, I'm conscious that a written response didn't land down as far as the chamber, so if I could ask Minister that at some stage the deputies are given by email the response that you read out. I'm sure it's not your fault. Okay, thanks. Deputies, does 1 minute each.
Yeah,
thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Minister. Minister, I understand the nature of examinership, but with all due respect, NAMA took on this healthy, profitable company, and it's on its watch that it got into difficulty that requires it to go into examinership. I think questions need to be asked about the way NAMA is doing its business, that companies that don't have a problem encounter problems when they get in under the umbrella of NAMA, and what's to make it worse. So that's the taxpayers' concern. The concern of these employees is their jobs, Minister, and you haven't mentioned their jobs. I have a response here from Minister Noonan in relation to NAMA and the priority it gives to retention of jobs in the sale of businesses as going concerns. And I'm assured it gives a very high priority to the preservation of jobs in any businesses with loans with the agency. But there's no evidence of it here, Minister. I believe it's crucial that the management buyout proceed. A notice of decision issued, and but for that did not proceed at the time, the company would not have gone into free fall, and it did go into free fall, and the blame, or a lot of the blame, lies on NAMA with this, Minister, and I believe they should be challenged. And I'm taking this up with the Minister for Finance, but in relation to the jobs, it's your remit. You're working night and day, I do believe, trying to create jobs. Here we have jobs, as I said, in the west of Ireland, hard come by, and they're under threat, and we need more action, and we need the reality of the promise that's on the reply that I got from the Minister for Finance in play in relation to the jobs for the employees of Elverys.
Deputy Cowan.
Thanks. Thank you, Minister, for your response. But can I ask you, when you say that the examiner is obliged to consult with the relevant parties privy to this process, do you think and do you agree that that consultation with the workers specifically has been minimal? And do you subsequently believe, and will you acknowledge to us, similar to what has been said by Deputy Mulhern, that NAMA do have a social obligation and a social responsibility to seek to pursue the retention of as many jobs as possible? And do you think that they are doing that in the proper fashion in this sense? And when you acknowledge that it was NAMA's recommendation, which was agreed with by the directors, that they enter this process, can you go a step further and say, when you talk about TUPE, that is, you know, the representatives and the staff, as I said, have a better engagement and involvement in assessing the bids that are there, which will determine their future ultimately, but which at the same time will meet with creditors' responsibilities and allow them a settlement that they can be happy with. But if NAMA is the lead creditor, then NAMA must oblige and be obligated to respect the mandate it has from this House, which is one with a social responsibility as well as an economic responsibility. And will you reiterate that for the House and reiterate that it be applied in this instance to the full letter of the law, in order for the staff to be sure in their minds that every effort is being made to retain and to offer them the best possible opportunity to retain their jobs? And as has been said previously, this company is in a profitable situation, and it cannot be allowed to be drowned by unrelated specifically to the business as regards to loans that are dragging it down. As I said earlier, this is the first indication that you can give as a member of this government to say that you will not stand idly by in this instance or in any future instances which may be coming down the track in relation to how banks deal with the debt associated with SMEs. Thank you.
Yeah, this is for clarification, Minister. It seems like a profitable company with the backing of its directorship. Directors went to NAMA and discussed about management buyout, and in that time we've seen a situation where the company's come into difficulty and mightn't be able to exercise that buyout. Now, there's something wrong there, to my mind, that process isn't dealing with. Why would a profitable company not be able to go in, buy out the situation? So I just want clarification on that. And the reason why I asked about the contracts and the conditions and pay and that and the jobs, if anybody does buy it out, is that TUPE, in my understanding, would have been the protection there for those workers, and those jobs should be protected no matter who buys it out. But just the whole process seems very strange to me, that a positive situation is started off, and then through that process we're in a situation now where the company is in difficulty and could be bought out by somebody else.
Deputy Minister.
I think, to be fair to NAMA, there's a bit of a misunderstanding of their role here. I mean, NAMA was supportive of an arrangement that would have facilitated a management buyout of a company that was insolvent. And there was, if you like, an agreement therefore implicit in some of the debts being dealt with to allow the company to continue to proceed. Now, that wasn't possible to complete. And that wasn't through, as I understand, it wasn't through a fault of NAMA that it wasn't possible to complete that. And NAMA, it was NAMA who suggested that the best way to protect the company after an alternative bid came in was to seek the examinership process, which is a process that allows the write-down of debt, to answer Deputy Cowan's point. It allows the write-down of debt where creditors agree, and it allows the court protection to save the jobs, save the enterprise, and try to keep a going concern. So what has happened here is that under, the role of NAMA has seen first one option tested, which didn't fulfill, if you like, and now it has moved to give another approach to have a viable outcome. And that's certainly the hope that I have, that viable outcome can emerge. But, it clearly deals with Deputy Cowan's point that this is a process which allows viable businesses to survive despite bad property decisions or property debts being a burden upon and threatening their existence. So that's what this process is about, and the courts have a role, and the purpose of the examinership is to save the jobs. The TUPE situation will apply regardless whether it is a management buyout or one of the other bids are successful and the business continues, the obligations of the transfer of undertakings apply in both cases. So in terms of the workers' legal security, they will be the same in both cases. But I acknowledge the point the Deputy makes that there's a preference for one role or another. The issue of the examiners, the examiner's role in relation to different players, creditors, workers, the examiner is governed by very strict legislation as to what an examiner can and can't do. Essentially, it is trying to find a scheme of arrangement which it can put to the creditors to allow a viable outcome. Now, in that process, I'm sure they do try to the best extent possible, keep workers involved, but they have a responsibility to the courts and to the creditors, and in this case to 6 bids, which no doubt have to be dealt with as 6 independent bids, confidentially handled in the way that they are presented. So I imagine that the examiner is under considerable legal constraint in the way he deals with this situation. But this is the best way in which we can seek to save the jobs involved, and that's certainly my sincere hope is the outcome of this. I think the examiner was appointed on the 4th of February, so it's still at a relatively early stage in the process. But I think at this point, I don't have a role in relation to an examinership. Obviously, the examinership has to deal with those directly involved and report back to the court, hopefully with the outcome of the various options that have emerged.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes topical issues. We now move on to our next item of today's business, which is item number 1, the ESB Electronic Communications Networks Bill 2013 amendments from the Seanad. There are 2 amendments here today, and 1 and 2 are related and will be discussed together. Minister.
Thank you, Cahill. I want to take these 2 amendments together, if I may, with the permission of the House. Please, they really are technical and purely drafting amendments back from the Seanad. They've been drafted following consultation with the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel and are required to improve the legal certainty of the bill. They do represent a change. They do not represent a change in policy in respect of the sections affected. So, in brief, Cahill, I move that the amendments be accepted.
Are there any other comments from anybody else in the chamber? So I'm just conscious, is this mic on? It's on? You can hear me? Yeah, it's fine. All right. Okay, so I'll now put the question that the Seanad amendment number 1 be agreed to. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. I now put the question that the Seanad amendment number 2 be agreed to. Agreed. Okay. Agreement to Seanad amendments is reported to the House. A message will be sent to Seanad Éireann acquainting it accordingly. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to thank the House again, Cahill, if I may, for facilitating the passage of the bill and to acknowledge the level of consensus that there was in the House behind this initiative to use the existing ESB supply system, either by the ESB or the ESB in collaboration with another company to roll out fibre optic cable to parts of Ireland that have endured a less than adequate service on occasion over recent years. And I'd like to thank the House for its support.
Thanks very much. Okay, we now move on to our next item of business today, item number 20, the Health Service Executive Bill 2013, second stage, resumed. So we'll call on Deputy Peter Matches to resume the debate. You have 9 minutes remaining in this slot.
But I'm sharing time with Deputy Dennis Naughton here, if that's agreed. I'll just take 3 minutes max, and Deputy Naughton can have 6.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I welcome the opportunity just to continue a few thoughts. The HSE, the vote, as it's called, the expenditure vote, is moving into the Department of Health. and the Minister for Health. But it's extremely important that the costing, the financial measurement of what goes on in the health service and the delivery of the health needs and requirements of patients in all hospitals, at all locations, needs to be measured in a way that allows the activities of delivering the service to be costed. To date, it's been a bland form of budgeting. It's been dollops of finance allocated to hospitals and so on. And there hasn't been an activities measurement that can be applied consistently and uniformly across all units in the service. This would be extremely important in advance of a universal health insurance system, whether that system is going to be a multi-insurance provider or a sole state provider. And I think at this stage it would be important for the government and its advisors to revisit the overall concept of universal health insurance and see where the shortcomings are in other systems, like in the Dutch model and so on. The United States also has multi-insurance participation, supposedly to provide competition, which would produce cost efficiencies. But in fact, that can also lead to, over delivery and over costing of that delivery into a system of profit-based delivery, which takes away from the essence, which should be patient-focused and needs-focused. So my advice would be, or the suggestion would be, that the framework for the accounting and financial measurement systems should be activities-based. In other words, that those elements that go into delivering good health and good health management at HSE or HSE locations would be properly set up on an integrated computer system that would allow for budgeting, measurement, historical measurement, and the comparison of budgets on activity-based accounting with outcomes. And that it would be done in a way that made sense, and that would also be flexible enough to take account for different systems of delivery according as they're developed. I'd like to hand over now to Deputy Naughton.
Deputy, 5 minutes, Deputy.
And I thank Deputy Matthews for sharing time with me. Cahirley, I want to specifically speak this evening on a report that was published last month, the Healthcare Quality Indicators in the Irish health system, examining the potential for hospital discharge data. And I want to specifically speak on that because I believe it has implications for the operation of this particular piece of legislation and the interaction or lack of interaction that takes place between the HSE and the Department of Health. On the 23rd of February last, Ian Carter, the National Director of Acute Hospitals, in an interview with Susan Mitchell of the Sunday Business Post, when she asked if the HSE had examined the reasons behind the high mortality rates in some units, Ian Carter responded by saying, "Not yet." He said the HSE was only now validating the figures and examining whether there was a real variance or whether differentials could have been attributed to poor coding of data. He went on to say, have we had a systemic approach? No, we haven't, in terms of drilling down to individual hospitals. It has been slow, but the exercise is now happening on a hospital-by-hospital basis. His defence is that the report had just been published. Now, I think this is an outrageous admission by a senior official within the Health Service Executive, because this report was available to the Department of Health and to the Minister for Health and to the HSE 30 months prior to that. 30 months prior to that, when the Minister came into the House here and read part of that report into the public record, and on foot of that used it as a validation for his decision to close the Accident and Emergency Department at Roscommon County Hospital. But following the publication of the report last month, the Chief Medical Officer described the report as a burglar alarm. And he said that while not saying that your house has been ransacked, clearly it needs to be checked out. But while the Department of Health told the HSE to check the alarm, both organisations continue to let that alarm ring for 30